If you pitched it today, a story of a Greek man who salvaged logs off the coast with his friend who was indigenous, with a grandmother and two grandchildren operating out of a cafe, it's unlikely the show would ever get greenlit. Not only was that show greenlit in Canada, but would go on to change Vancouver, the Canadian film industry, and become an integral part of Canadian culture. The Beachcombers is considered one of the greatest Canadian television shows in history, and one of the longest-running Canadian shows ever with 387 episodes. It was a show ahead of its time with its portrayal of Indigenous characters, a focus on the environment, and an ensemble cast of characters that would shape future Canadian television all the way to 2020. Today, I want to look at how this show, The Beachcombers, had a huge impact on Canada and why it's still important today. The show would premiere on October 1st, 1972, only a couple weeks after Canada had united for the Summit Series. Airing at 7 p.m., the ratings were weak, and many felt the main character, Nick, was unconventional for a leading man on a show. Over the remaining episodes, viewership increased as his family-friendly stories became popular among Canadians. In 1972, 19 episodes were ordered, and The Beachcombers was on its way to becoming an icon of Canadiana. The show would also find a strong audience in Britain, as well as the United States, Australia, New Zealand, Ireland, South Africa, and Germany. The reach of The Beachcombers did a lot to show the Sunshine Coast to the world, something that had not been done before. So with a show that ended 30 years ago, why am I talking about it now? Most of the people watching and listening to this likely weren't even alive, or were very young like I was when the show ended. Well, I'm talking about the show because not only is it a part of Canadian history and our culture, but it did something truly unique. It was the first Canadian series that did not follow an American model, giving a regional slice of life and a depiction of blue-collar work that was rare on television at the time. It also set itself in British Columbia, rather than film in British Columbia and pretend to be a different location. Its use of Indigenous elements was also rare, featuring many storylines that looked at Indigenous issues using Indigenous actors. Above everything, the way the show highlighted the Indigenous was exceptional for its time. In talking to those who were influenced by the show or watched the show, its use of Indigenous actors and storylines was ahead of its time. The Beachcombers would have far-reaching impacts on Canadian culture as well. Molly's Reach, a power pop band out of Edmonton, named themselves after the centerpiece location of the show. The show itself would inspire others like North of 60, Republic of Doyle, and Corner Gas. It also helped CBC expand its programming and production to regions outside of Toronto, and it raised the profile of Vancouver as a shooting location. When the Beachcombers debuted, Vancouver was nearly empty of film and television productions in the early 1970s. By the time the Beachcombers ended, Vancouver and British Columbia would be known as Hollywood North, with shows such as The X-Files being filmed there. Without the Beachcombers, it's likely that would have never happened. Even Gibson's, where Beachcombers was filmed, would benefit from the show, even beyond the money that comes in from fans who are visiting the community. Needless Things was filmed in the community in 1993, The Irresistible Blueberry Farm in 2016, and The Seamstress in 2009. Its international reputation increased in 2009 when it was declared the most livable community in the entire world by the United Nations. For those who worked on the show, starting in the early days, they were often new to the entire industry, but they would go on to help define the filming scene in Vancouver for decades, all the way up to today. Many of the department heads in Vancouver got their start, or were employed, on the Beachcombers, with some estimates being 1,000 people worked on the set at one point or another, and then went on to their careers. Many prominent Canadians, actors and otherwise, came through the Beachcombers set as well. Chief Dan George, one of Canada's greatest Indigenous actors and the first Indigenous person to be nominated for an Academy Award, appeared in 8 episodes of the show from 1972 until his death in 1981 as Chief Moses Charlie. David Suzuki appeared in the show as himself in 1981, and several notable future actors appeared on the show before they were ever famous, including future X-Files villain William B. Davis in 1986, Don S. Davis, who would go on to appear on Twin Peaks and as General Hammond on Stargate SG-1. He appeared in an episode in 1989 and would actually move to Gibson's. Bruce Harwood, a future lone gunman on The X-Files, was in an episode in 1989, while noted Canadian actor Ian Tracy appeared in 1988. Ryan Stiles appeared in 1985 on an episode before reaching fame in the 1990s on Whose Line Is It Anyways? Janet Wright, who would play Emma on Cornered Gas, appeared in an episode in 1987, and legendary actor Gordon Pinsent appeared in 3 episodes from 1975 to 1978. The Beachcombers went off the air over 30 years ago, but it still has legions of fans across the world, and there are calls for it to be put online for streaming, and its impact on the Canadian film and television industry is still being felt. Without the Beachcombers, we've had The X-Files being filmed in Vancouver in the 1990s, which shows like Cornered Gas or Kim's Convenience even exist. Whether you watched it or not, or even alive when it went off the air, you've definitely seen its impact in Canada.